It all started on an ordinary afternoon, one that held no sign of the storm about to crash into my life. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when my husband's device buzzed on the table. Normally, I never checked his messages. Trust was something I believed in deeply. But that day, something felt off. The message preview showed a name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji and the words, "The kids can't wait to see you tonight." My heart skipped a beat, confusion tightening around my chest. Kids. We didn't have any children. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, frozen between disbelief and dread. Then curiosity, or maybe fear, pushed me to open the message. As I scrolled, the truth began to unravel in fragments that cut deeper than any blade could. There were photos, him smiling, holding 2 little children. There were messages filled with warmth, plans, and promises. Each word was a betrayal, each picture a dagger. My mind refused to process it at first. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe someone was playing a cruel trick. But the dates, the tone, the way he wrote her name, it was all too real. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my hands trembling as I tried to breathe. The man I had trusted, loved, and shared my life with was living another life entirely, one where I didn't exist. I remember sitting there for hours, trying to piece together fragments of the past, wondering how long this had been going on. Every late meeting, every unexplained trip, every vague answer suddenly made sense. The puzzle pieces I had ignored out of love were now forming a picture I didn't want to see. I opened his gallery, emails, social media, everything. It was like stepping into a dark world that had been hidden right beside me. There were receipts for gifts I never received, weekend getaways I was told were work retreats, even family photos taken in places he claimed he'd never been. The realization that I had been sharing my husband with another woman and that he had children with her hit me like a wave that refused to stop. I couldn't even cry at first. The shock numbed everything. I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching a stranger's life fall apart. I wanted to scream, to confront him immediately, but another part of me wanted to know everything before I did. I needed to understand how deep the deception went. Over the next few days, I became a silent detective in my own marriage. While he laughed and chatted as if nothing was wrong, I dug deeper. I went through phone bills, call logs, old calendars, and even credit card statements. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that this wasn't some recent mistake, it was a life he had carefully built, one lie at a time. There were birthdays, anniversaries, and school events for children I'd never met. He had been splitting his time between 2 homes, 2 worlds, 2 versions of himself. At night, when he fell asleep, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone could fake love so convincingly. Every memory now felt poisoned. I thought about the day we got married, how he looked at me with tears in his eyes as he promised honesty and forever. I thought about all the times I had supported him through hardships, defended him when others doubted his sincerity, and believed his every word. All of it was built on lies. The weight of it all pressed down on my chest until I could barely breathe. There was a moment when I almost convinced myself to pretend I hadn't seen anything. Maybe it would be easier to live in ignorance, to keep my perfect little world intact. But then I saw another message from her, a video of the children calling him daddy, and that illusion shattered completely. I couldn't unsee it, and I couldn't unknow it. My husband had built a secret family behind my back, and I was nothing more than a piece in his double life. I started to notice every small detail that had once seemed insignificant. The smell of unfamiliar perfume on his shirt, the times he came home with a different phone, the sudden change in his spending habits. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for me to see it. He had perfected the art of deception, but he hadn't counted on fate slipping up with one careless text. Each day that followed was a battle between rage and heartbreak. I watched him sit across from me at the dinner table, smiling, asking about my day, pretending like everything was fine. I studied his face, searching for any sign of guilt, any flicker of the man I thought I knew. But there was nothing. Just calm lies and steady eyes. And that was when I realized the depth of his betrayal. It wasn't just about the other family, it was about how effortlessly he could live with the deceit. I began to collect proof silently, saving screenshots, copying photos, and forwarding messages to my private email. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about clarity. I needed to confront him with truth so undeniable that even he couldn't twist it. But before that confrontation, I needed to prepare myself emotionally, because facing the truth out loud would mean admitting that my entire marriage had been a lie. The hardest part was acting normal. I smiled when he came home, cooked dinner, and played the role of the loving wife, all while my heart screamed inside. Every time he kissed me goodnight, I felt sick knowing where those lips had been. Every time he said I love you, the words felt hollow, echoing against the emptiness that had replaced the love I once felt. It was as if I was living in a theater, playing a role in a story I didn't believe in anymore. But beneath that calm surface, something was changing inside me. The pain was still raw, but beneath it was a growing strength, a silent determination. I had been deceived, humiliated, and used, but I refused to stay the victim. The truth was now mine, and soon, it would be his turn to face it. The moment the truth fully sank in, everything around me felt unreal. The air itself seemed heavy, as if it were pressing against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror, unable to recognize the woman looking back at me. Her eyes were red, her face pale, her expression hollow. It wasn't just sadness that filled me, it was a strange mix of disbelief, anger, shame, and heartbreak all tangled together, each emotion fighting to take control. My mind kept repeating the same questions over and over. How could he do this? Why wasn't I enough? What did I do wrong? The love that had once been my comfort now burned like poison in my veins. 4 days, I went through the motions of life in silence. I cooked, worked, smiled when necessary, but inside, I was breaking piece by piece. Every small reminder of him, his shirt on the chair, his toothbrush by the sink, his laughter echoing through the house, felt like a cruel reminder of the lies beneath our life together. I wanted to cry, but my tears had limits. There came a point when even my sadness turned into numbness. The heartache was so deep that it stopped feeling like emotion and started feeling like When he came home at night, pretending everything was normal, I studied his every movement. How easily he could smile, how smoothly he lied, how gently he touched my hand as if nothing had changed. I envied his calm. I envied the way he could carry his secret without a flicker of guilt on his face. Meanwhile, my body trembled with every breath I took near him. My silence became my mask. I laughed when I needed to, nodded when required, but inside, I was screaming so loudly that I could barely hear my own thoughts. There were nights when I would lock myself in the bathroom, sitting on the cold floor, clutching my chest to stop the ache. I would look at the wedding ring on my finger and wonder what it even meant anymore. That ring, once a symbol of love and promises, now felt like a shackle binding me to someone who had destroyed my trust. I thought of all the times he had sworn that I was the only one, all the times he said he couldn't live without me. How easily those words had flowed from his mouth, how easily I had believed them. Sometimes, I felt anger more than sadness, raw, burning anger that surged through me without warning. I would find myself pacing the room, clenching my fists, replaying every lie he had ever told me. Every I love you felt like mockery now. Every compliment, every kind gesture, it all became evidence of manipulation. I would stand in front of the mirror, tears running down my face, whispering to myself, he fooled you. I hated myself for not seeing it sooner, for loving someone so deeply that I ignored all the signs. The betrayal wasn't just his, it felt like my failure too. But anger never stayed long. It would dissolve into grief again, deep, aching grief that made it hard to function. My body felt heavy, my thoughts foggy. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly. The nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed beside him, pretending to sleep, while my mind raced with images of him holding her, laughing with their children, living a life. Each day became a silent war between my heart and my mind. My heart still remembered the good times, the moments of laughter, the shared dreams, the tenderness that once felt so real. But my mind wouldn't let me forget the betrayal. It reminded me again and again that love built on lies is nothing more than illusion. I tried to distract myself, to bury my emotions under routine, but even small things triggered me. A movie scene about love, a song on the radio, A family walking hand in hand, everything reminded me of what I thought I had and what I had truly lost. I started isolating myself from friends and family because I couldn't bear to fake smiles or answer questions. They would have noticed something was wrong. My voice shook whenever I spoke too long, and my eyes couldn't hide the exhaustion. So I withdrew. I told everyone I was just tired or busy, but inside, I was battling the urge to fall apart completely. My thoughts became dark, and there were moments when I questioned my worth entirely. How could he choose someone else, another family, another life, when I had given him everything? That question haunted me day and night. There were moments of self-blame that cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I convinced myself that maybe I had done something wrong, that maybe I hadn't been enough of a wife, that maybe I had driven him away without realizing it. It took everything in me to remember that deceit was his choice, not my fault. But even knowing that logically didn't stop the emotional torment. Betrayal makes you doubt not just the other person, but yourself. I began to question my instincts, my memories, my ability to trust my own judgment. At times, I would try to replay the timeline, searching for the exact moment things began to change. Was it that business trip 2 years ago? The sudden phone calls he would take outside? The new cologne he started wearing? Every clue I found only deepened the ache. The story of our marriage, once full of love and laughter, now read like a carefully constructed lie. I realized that the man sleeping beside me wasn't my partner anymore. He was a stranger wearing the face of someone I once loved. The pain became something I carried with me everywhere, to work, to the grocery store, even in silence. It was like a shadow that refused to leave, a constant reminder that my world had been torn apart by someone I trusted completely. Some mornings, I woke up hoping it was all a nightmare, but reality always hit just as hard. My body went through the motions, but my heart felt like it had been ripped open and left to bleed. And yet, even through the tears and the sleepless nights, a part of me was still searching for strength. I didn't know what form it would take or when it would appear, but somewhere deep inside, I could feel a spark, faint but alive, reminding me that even in the darkest heartbreak, there was still a part of me that refused to be completely broken. Once the initial shock began to fade, something inside me shifted. The tears that had once fallen so easily began to dry, replaced by a quiet, steady determination. I realized that I couldn't live in confusion any longer. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof. It wasn't enough to know the truth in my heart. I wanted to see it, hold it, and confront it head-on. If I was going to face him, I had to have every piece of evidence in my hands. The thought of him denying it, twisting my words, or gaslighting me again made my blood boil. I refused to let him turn me into the fool he thought I was. The first step was to gather what I already had. The text messages were a start, but I needed more. Late one night, when he was asleep, I unlocked his phone again, hands shaking, heart pounding in my chest. I went through his photo gallery, scrolling past pictures of us smiling together, then stumbled into a hidden folder. That was where the real truth lived. Dozens of photos, birthdays, holidays, trips, none of which included me. There he was, holding another woman close, kissing her forehead, their children laughing in the background. My throat tightened as I stared at the images. It was like watching a movie of a life I didn't belong to. I took screenshots of everything, sending them quietly to my own email, each click of the screen burning like fire through my veins. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to know who she was, where she lived, and how long this secret family had been a part of his world. I checked his social media, the comments, the tags, the hidden interactions that once seemed harmless. I noticed that he never posted pictures of us anymore, but he often liked hers, commented with small emojis, the kind that meant more than words. I clicked through her profile, and there it was, his face appearing in the background of her photos, their children wearing clothes I recognized from his shopping receipts. It all began to connect, every lie slotting into place like a puzzle, revealing a picture I could no longer ignore. I began saving everything, messages, pictures, receipts, even emails from his supposed business trips. I created a folder on my laptop, hidden under an innocent name, where I organized every piece of evidence like a case file. Each document, each screenshot was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I stopped seeing him as my husband and started seeing him as a subject of investigation. I read through his credit card statements, matching the dates with the photos I had found. Every transaction told a story: dinners at restaurant. One afternoon, while he was out, I decided to dig deeper into his work laptop, the one he always guarded so closely. It took me a few tries, but I guessed his password. What I found there took my breath away. There were flight bookings, emails with her name, and even school fee receipts for the children. My vision blurred as I scrolled through the messages: warm, affectionate exchanges filled with love and domestic details. He had built a full life with her, one that mirrored ours in terrifying detail. They had traditions, inside jokes, even plans for the future. I copied every email, every receipt, and saved them all. I wanted to be ready for the day I would finally confront him. I began noticing the patterns in his lies. He had a schedule for deception: weekdays with me, weekends sometimes working out of town, which I now knew were spent with them. He had created a routine so precise that it almost seemed professional. The cruelty of his deceit was in its perfection. He made sure neither side ever collided. It made me wonder how many times he'd looked me in the eye right after leaving her house, how many times he'd kissed me with her scent still on him. Those thoughts cut deep, but I used that pain to stay focused. There were moments I nearly broke down during the process. Late at night, when I sat alone gathering evidence, I would feel the tears threatening to return. My heart wanted to crumble, but my mind wouldn't let it. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore, it was about truth. I had spent years living inside his lie, and now I was going to bring that lie into the light. I needed to be strategic, careful, patient. I couldn't let emotions cloud my judgment. Every step I took had to be deliberate because once I exposed him, there would be no going back. I started taking photos of his belongings: the shirts he wore when he claimed to be on business trips, the receipts left in his pockets, even small gifts that seemed out of place. I stored them all, labeling. I even reached out to a close friend, someone I trusted completely, and confided in her. She helped me confirm details discreetly, tracing his travel dates and matching them with the records I had. There was a strange calmness in our conversations, a quiet acknowledgement that I wasn't imagining things. Knowing someone else had seen the proof made it even more real. It was no longer a nightmare that existed only in my mind. It was fact, and soon, it would be his downfall. Each day, I moved closer to the truth, but he remained oblivious. He'd sit across from me at dinner, talking about his day, and I would nod, pretending to listen, all the while thinking about the evidence I'd collected. I looked at him differently now, not as my husband, but as a liar whose time was running out. I began planning how I would reveal everything, imagining the shock on his face when he realized how much I knew. The anticipation became its own form of power. Sometimes, when I caught him texting secretly or stepping outside to take a call, I would watch quietly, no longer angry, but calculating. He had no idea that every move he made was another piece added to the story I was building against him. I recorded dates, times, details, every inconsistency he thought he could hide. The lies that once blinded me now fueled my clarity. I no longer felt weak or helpless. Each new discovery strengthened the part of me that he had tried to destroy. I didn't know exactly how I would confront him or when, but I knew one thing for certain: by the time I did, he would have no room to deny anything. Every secret he thought he had buried was now in my hands, waiting for the perfect moment to be revealed. The plan began to form quietly in the back of my mind, like a whisper that grew louder with every lie he told. I knew I couldn't just confront him privately and let him twist the truth or beg for forgiveness. He had spent years building a web of deception, one that hurt not only me but everyone who believed in the image he presented to the world. I didn't want a screaming match behind closed doors. I wanted exposure. I wanted the truth to burn under the light where everyone could see it. The thought didn't come from hate alone, it came from the need for justice, for reclaiming the dignity that his betrayal had stolen from me. If he had been bold enough to live two lives, then I would be bold enough to bring both of those lives crashing together. I started by observing his patterns more closely, not as a broken wife but as someone preparing for a performance in which every move mattered. He had a tendency to plan small gatherings with friends and colleagues, events where he liked to boast about his perfect marriage. It was the image he loved most, the devoted husband, the charming man, the loyal family man. That was where I decided the truth would surface. I wanted his lies to crumble in front of the very people who believed them. But before I could make that happen, I needed every detail lined up perfectly. I began collecting the last pieces of evidence with renewed focus. I printed photos, compiled messages, and created a folder so thorough that no explanation or excuse could survive it. I wanted it to be undeniable. Every photo of him with his secret family, every affectionate message, every receipt, all of it carefully organized. I even prepared screenshots of the conversations between him and her, the ones where they discussed keeping things quiet, the ones where he promised he would manage both sides. Reading those words made me sick, but I knew they would be powerful weapons when the time came. I also kept my emotions hidden during those days, mastering a calmness that even surprised me. He would sit next to me on the couch, laughing at something on TV, completely unaware that I was silently rehearsing the steps of his downfall in my mind. I learned to mirror his tone, to play along with his lies while secretly constructing the truth behind them. Each smile I gave him was a mask, each "I love you" he said to me was another brick added to the wall of evidence that would soon surround him. There was one particular night when he announced a small dinner party with our close friends. He wanted to celebrate his recent promotion, another piece of his carefully crafted image. I knew instantly that this would be the stage for my revelation. The date was set, and I began preparing in silence. I bought a calm, elegant dress, not to impress him but to remind myself of the strength I still carried. While he arranged the food and drinks, I arranged the truth. I prepared a slideshow of photos, messages, and screenshots disguised as a simple presentation, a surprise tribute for his success. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had spent years surprising me with lies, now it was my turn to surprise him with the truth. In the days leading up to the dinner, I moved like a ghost through our home, calm on the surface, burning beneath. I watched him joke with friends on the phone, kiss me goodbye in the morning, all while I prepared to dismantle the illusion he had built. I printed extra copies of the documents, just in case. I emailed the evidence to myself and to a trusted friend, ensuring that no matter what happened, the truth wouldn't be buried. I wanted to make sure he couldn't twist his way out of it or destroy the proof before others saw it. The day of the dinner arrived like the calm before a storm. He was in high spirits, full of charm, pouring drinks and greeting everyone warmly. Our friends filled the room with laughter, unaware of what was about to unfold. I move. When it was finally time, he stood up to thank everyone for coming, talking proudly about how grateful he was for his wonderful wife and how lucky he was to have such a perfect marriage. I remember the sound of his voice, smooth, confident, deceitful, and the way everyone smiled and nodded. My hands didn't shake when I stood beside him, my expression calm but deliberate. I told the guests that I had prepared something special, a short presentation about our life together. He looked pleasantly surprised, perhaps even touched, as I opened the laptop and connected it to the screen. The first few images appeared innocent enough, pictures from our vacations, moments from anniversaries, smiles that once meant something real. Then came the shift. The next slide showed him with the other woman, holding her hand, smiling at the camera. Gasps filled the room. I clicked again. Photos of him with their children, messages full of love, plans written in his own words. His face drained of color, his confident smile dissolving into panic. The room fell silent except for the sound of his breathing growing uneven. He tried to speak, to interrupt, but I kept going, letting the truth speak louder than any denial could. Each image, each message appeared like a blow, stripping away the lies layer by layer. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My voice remained steady as I explained how I had found everything, how long he had been deceiving not just me but everyone who stood there thinking they knew him. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that lingers in the air when something irreversible has happened. I watched as his mask cracked completely, the arrogance replaced by disbelief, guilt, and shame. The man who had once controlled every situation now stood helpless, exposed, and speechless in front of the people he had worked so hard to impress. The whispers began around us, shock, pity, disgust. His friends couldn't even look him in the eye. Some turned toward me, others sigh. I had envisioned that moment countless times in my mind, and yet the reality of it carried a strange stillness. It wasn't triumph or joy I felt, it was clarity. For the first time, the lies were gone, and all that remained was truth laid bare for the world to see. I stood there, calm and unshaken, as he looked at me with eyes full of disbelief, realizing that the double life he had so carefully hidden no longer existed. The room was thick with silence, the kind that holds its breath and waits for someone to speak but no one dares to. Faces that only moments ago were glowing with laughter were now frozen in disbelief. Every pair of eyes turned toward him, and the man who once prided himself on control suddenly looked small, cornered, stripped of the confidence he had always worn like armor. I stood there, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on my shoulders, but I did not tremble. My voice was steady, my gaze unwavering. For years, I had been the woman who stayed quiet, who believed, who trusted, but in that moment, I became the woman who revealed everything he tried to hide. He tried to speak at first, stumbling over his words, his voice cracking as he tried to find an explanation. "It's not what it looks like," he muttered, his eyes darting from me to the horrified faces of our friends. But it was exactly what it looked like. The photos, the messages, the receipts, the details, they told a story that couldn't be undone by denial. The more he tried to talk, the more ridiculous he sounded, and I didn't have to say a single word to prove him wrong. The evidence spoke louder than either of us ever could. I remember the look on his face when I turned the screen toward him, forcing him to look at the life he had built behind my back. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His jaw clenched, his hands trembled, and the fake charm that had always fooled everyone around us was gone. For the first time, he wasn't the confident husband or the clever liar, he was a man caught eye. As the slideshow ended, I closed the laptop slowly, the final sound echoing in the quiet room. I didn't need to say anything more. The truth was already out there, irreversible and undeniable. Some guests began to leave quietly, murmuring their goodbyes, avoiding his gaze. Others came to me, their faces filled with empathy, offering silent support. I accepted their words with a calm nod, though inside I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, exhaustion, and the faint tremor of something that felt like freedom. He stood there, unable to move, his face pale and blank. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes, not just that he had been caught, but that he had lost control completely. His power over me, over his image, over the story he had written, was gone. Every lie he had told, every excuse he had crafted, had led to this moment where truth had stripped him bare in front of everyone he had fooled. The sound of glasses clinking in the background, the faint shuffle of feet, the awkward coughs, all of it seemed distant. I was focused only on him, the man I had once loved, now a stranger caught in the wreckage of his own deceit. He muttered apologies under his breath, half-hearted, panicked, desperate. But apologies meant nothing when the damage had been deliberate, calculated, and repeated. Words couldn't rebuild what he had destroyed. Even as the last of our guests quietly left, their footsteps fading down the hallway, I stood there, unmoving, watching him struggle to gather the remnants of his dignity. The truth hung heavy in the air between us, undeniable and cold. I had spent years living in the shadows of his lies, but now the light was everywhere, exposing every secret he thought he could hide. After that night, the house felt different. The walls that once echoed with laughter and shared moments now stood in heavy silence, witnesses to the truth that had shattered everything. Every corner held memories that no longer belonged to the same life, every corner held memories that no longer belonged to the same life, every photo frame seemed to mock me with its frozen smiles. Yet beneath the quiet, something in me began to change. The pain was still there, raw, sharp, and unpredictable, but it no longer ruled me the way it once did. There was a strange calmness that followed destruction, the kind that comes when there's nothing left to lose. I had faced the worst, and I was still standing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living in denial or fear. I was free from lies, even if freedom came with scars. He tried to reach out in the days that followed. Calls, messages, letters, all filled with apologies and promises that felt meaningless. Each word was a repetition of the same old manipulation, a desperate attempt to pull me back into the illusion. But something inside me had hardened. I had listened to his words for years, believed them, let them guide my choices. Now they sounded hollow, echoes of a language that no longer moved me. I didn't respond. Silence became my answer. It was strange how powerful silence could be when once I had felt powerless. He had controlled every narrative, but now he was the one waiting, uncertain, left to face the quiet truth that no excuse could erase. In the days that followed, I began rebuilding my routines from the ground up. Simple things felt different, making coffee in the morning, walking through the neighborhood, opening my laptop to work, all of them small reminders that life was continuing, even if mine had changed completely. The loneliness was there, of course, but it was cleaner than betrayal. It didn't poison me, it simply sat beside me, familiar but harmless. I learned to make peace with it. I didn't rush to fill the void with noise or distractions. Instead, I let the silence teach me who I was without him. There were moments when memories came uninvited, hitting me unexpectedly, the way he used to laugh, the trips we took, the promises he made. They no longer made me cry. They just reminded me of how much I had given to someone who never deserved it. For the first time, I saw the relationship not through love but through clarity. It was a strange kind of peace, one built not from forgetting, but from understanding. I didn't hate him anymore, hate took too much energy. What I felt was distance, a quiet indifference that told me I had finally let go. People around me reacted differently. Some offered pity, others admiration, some curiosity masked as concern. I didn't explain much. The story was already known, and I didn't owe anyone the details. What mattered to me was not how others saw it, but how I carried it. I refused to let my story be one of humiliation or defeat. It was a story of truth, of rediscovery, of power regained after years of being silenced by lies. Each morning, when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who had been through fire and walked out of it, not untouched, but unbroken. He tried to meet me one last time, insisting he wanted to talk, to make things right. I agreed, not out of hope, but closure. When he arrived, his face carried exhaustion and regret, but I didn't feel sympathy. He talked about mistakes, about confusion, about how he still loved me. His words were a tangled mess of guilt and excuses. I listened quietly, not to understand him, but to confirm what I already knew, that he hadn't changed, that his remorse was only born from exposure, not conscience. When he finally stopped speaking, waiting for my response, I simply told him that I wished him the same honesty he had denied me. Then I walked away. The sound of my footsteps leaving that place felt like the final chapter closing. In the weeks that followed, I began to find strength in solitude. I redecorated the house, removing traces of the life we had shared, painting over the walls that once held our memories. Each change, no matter how small, felt symbolic, a quiet act of reclaiming space. I donated his clothes, deleted his photos, and erased his number. It wasn't about anger, it was about cleansing. The weight that had sat on my chest for so long began to lift, little by little, as if my soul was finally learning how to breathe again. There were days when healing didn't look graceful. Some mornings, I woke up heavy with sadness, other days restless with rage. Healing wasn't a straight line, it was a slow unraveling of pain, a process of forgiving myself for believing in lies. But every setback came with a new realization that survival was not about pretending to be fine, but about facing the broken pieces and deciding they were still worth keeping. I learned to smile again, not because everything was perfect, but because I finally understood that imperfection was real, and real was enough. Slowly, I started rediscovering parts of myself that had been lost in the shadow of that marriage. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned, reconnected with friends I had drifted from, and began traveling again, not to escape, but to see the world through new eyes. For the first time in years, my life felt like mine. Every choice I made carried intention, no lies, no pretending, no fear of betrayal. It was strange how light the world felt once the weight of deceit was gone. There were still nights when loneliness whispered, when I missed the idea of love more than the person himself. But those moments reminded me that I had survived something many never face so openly. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had already won by reclaiming myself. The truth, once painful, had become my freedom. I no longer looked back with bitterness, only with understanding. What he had done defined his character, not my worth.